They thought she was a joke the moment she walked in, just another civvy playing soldier, wearing a uniform that didn't belong. The laughter came easy, until she bent down, and the knife in her boot caught the light. Not regulation, not for show. The room went silent, because suddenly, they weren't looking at a joke. They were looking at something they didn't understand, something trained, controlled, dangerous. She didn't flinch, didn't explain, just kept working like she'd done this under fire with blood on the ground and lives in the balance. If you're ready for the story behind the silence, subscribe now. You won't forget her name. They noticed her the moment she walked in. Not because she made an entrance-ish didn't, but because something about her didn't quite match the rest of the facility's rhythm. Civilian contractor, supposedly. Thin frame, worn boots, standard-issue fatigues that hung a little too straight, a little too stiff, like they hadn't been worn in years but remembered exactly how. Her name patch read Reyes. No first initial, no rank, just 5 letters on Velcro. The kind of patch that didn't carry stories. Yet, she walked past the front desk without waiting for clearance, a battered black tool bag slung over one shoulder. The receptionist looked up, opened his mouth, then closed it again without saying a word. She moved like someone who didn't need permission, like someone who already had it. The younger recruit saw the uniform and smiled the way young men do when they think they've spotted a joke before anyone else. Halloween came early, one of them muttered under his breath. Another smirked, nudging his buddy. She's LARPing logistics. The laughter was low, shared between people who hadn't learned yet how wrong you could be with confidence. She didn't react, just kept walking toward the comms shed, like she'd been doing it every day for years. Maybe she had, maybe not. Staff Sergeant Dylan Cross didn't laugh. He didn't speak, either. Just leaned against the bay wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, watching. He'd seen her kind before, he was almost sure of it. Not in this uniform, not on this base. Somewhere else, someplace quieter. Somewhere people didn't joke when they saw someone like her. He studied the way her eyes moved, never wide, never hurried, like she was tracking exits and blind spots without even thinking about it, like she knew what those shadows meant. He watched her unpack her tools, each item placed deliberately, worn grips, custom handles, nothing standard, not regulation, just effective. And in that moment, something settled behind his eyes. Not afraid, not even suspicious, just alert. Because people like her didn't walk onto bases like this by accident. And they sure as hell didn't wear uniforms unless they'd earned them. The jokes started before Reyes had even zipped open her kit. One of the corporals, broad-shouldered, loud in that insecure way, nudged his buddy and said it just loud enough to carry. Somebody's playing dress-up. The others chuckled, their voices bouncing off the cinder block walls of the comms shed like rubber bullets. Reyes didn't flinch. She just crouched near the open panel on the west wall and began sorting her tools with the kind of unhurried calm that made people uncomfortable. She didn't look up, didn't speak. The silence hit harder than it should have, the kind of silence that made jokes feel thin and nervous. The recruits kept watching anyway. Not because they cared about the system she was working on, most of them didn't even know what it controlled, but because watching was easier than admitting they didn't understand what she was doing. One of them leaned over to whisper, "Bet she was logistics, maybe public affairs." His friend grinned. "Nah, too quiet. I'm going with gym teacher." Reyes reached for a bolt she'd dropped. It bounced once against the floor, rolled under a fiber conduit. She bent at the waist to retrieve it. That's when it happened. A glint of matte black steel, clean and compact, tucked into a sheath at the inside of her right boot. It wasn't flashy. No paracord grip, no aftermarket clip. Just a fixed-blade combat knife, precisely where it would be if someone had trained to draw it mid-roll, mid-fall, mid-close quarters chaos. The room stilled. No one spoke. The air in the shed suddenly felt tighter, like everyone had forgotten how to breathe. The knife hadn't been flashed like a threat. It had just existed, like it had always been there, like it was part of her, and that was somehow worse. Someone finally muttered, "That's not part of standard issue." No one replied, not even with a joke. Reyes didn't notice her, pretended not to. She slid the bolt into place, reached for a torque driver, and resumed her work without a single wasted motion. Just a woman in a uniform that didn't fit quite right, fixing a system no one else wanted to touch. But now, nobody was laughing. Cross didn't move at first, just watched from across the range as Reyes adjusted a calibration relay with a kind of casual precision that didn't belong to her pay grade. The voltage had been spiking for months, something nobody had bothered to fix, because patchwork got the job done well enough. But Reyes wasn't patching. She was correcting rewiring a decades-old junction by hand, like she'd memorized the schematics in a language no one taught anymore. He stepped closer, slow, careful not to disrupt whatever rhythm she was in. She didn't look up, but he saw her shoulders shift slightly, acknowledging presence without acknowledging threat. Her sleeves were rolled up, and that's when he saw it. Not the usual nicks or bruises you got from maintenance work. Her hands were rough in a deliberate way, calloused but precise. The backs bore long, faint scars that traced in oddly straight lines. Not random. Not accidental. And her wrist's faint discoloration there. The kind of healed burn you only got from heat exposure under pressure. Not electrical. Not workplace. Field. Controlled. She finished the job in silence, tightening the last connector before closing the panel with a soft click. Cross watched her thumb the power sequence, not rushing, not doubting. The system hummed to life like it hadn't in years. He knew that sound. It was what it was supposed to sound like. He just hadn't heard it in so long he'd forgotten. Someone from the back muttered, just loud enough to pass for a real question. "Where'd you learn that trick?" She didn't look over, just shrugged like it didn't matter. Here and there. Cross didn't smile. He turned away and walked back to the comms bay, pulled out his tablet, and initiated a restricted personnel trace. He keyed in her badge number. Civilian contractor. Assigned 3 months ago. No unit history, no training file, no rank, clearance level, classified. He called command. Got routed 3 times. 7 minutes of hold music, then nothing. Then a voice came through. Flat, male, untagged. "Stop asking." That was it. No name, no context. Just the kind of warning that didn't need repeating. Cross ended the call, stared at the tool bag Reyes had left propped against the wall, and realized something quietly unsettling. Whoever she was, she didn't need their permission. She'd never asked for it. Cross wasn't the type to ignore instinct. 20 years in uniform had taught him the difference between mystery and threat. And Reyes didn't feel like a threat, but she also didn't fit into any mold he recognized. That was the problem. People like her weren't supposed to exist quietly. Not on his base. Not wearing uniforms with no history. Not fixing systems with the kind of fluency that couldn't be learned in any contractor orientation. So he started digging. Not officially, just a quiet background trace through back-channel systems. A name search on the internal network. Departmental access logs, deployment rosters, anything that might explain who the hell she was. He got back a file, but it might as well have been blank. Her record wasn't thin, it was hollow. Redactions over redactions. Lines that simply read, undisclosed under fields that were supposed to hold schoolhouse IDs, training credentials, operational history. Under entry path, it just said, direct entry, tier exception. And buried beneath the rest, in the notes section of a system not meant for casual access, was a single acronym: SOG Do Not Flag, Do Not Contact. Cross stared at the screen, exhaling slowly through his teeth. That wasn't standard special forces. That wasn't even JSOC or Ghost Detachment. He'd seen the term once, in a locked drawer at Fort McPherson, attached to a mission folder that didn't officially exist, a folder that vanished the next day. SOG, not Special Operations Group, not anymore. Just 3 letters carved into the side of black budget assignments meant to disappear the moment boots left the tarmac. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed a hand over his face. If that acronym was real-ifin, Reyes wasn't just another ghost. She was one of the ones they never talked about. And now she was here, rewiring.com nodes, patch sealing fiber optics like she belonged to base maintenance, like she hadn't been someone who once operated under a call sign instead of a name. Cross looked out the window toward the comms shed, where Reyes was methodically coiling cable. No rush, no interest in recognition. She was doing the job no one asked her to dobe it that someone clearly needed done. And suddenly, Cross wasn't sure who had authorized her, or if anyone had. It was a Thursday, humid in the way only military bases manage to be: thick air, clinging heat, and the constant low hum of half-functional HVAC systems doing their best. Reyes walked into the armory like she had a reason, which was rare enough to draw a few curious looks. She carried a voltmeter under one arm, the old kind with analog dials and a leather strap frayed from real use. She moved like she always did, quietly, directly, the kind of presence that didn't demand a room's attention, but always managed to keep it. At the far bench, an E3 was struggling with a sidearm, a well-worn SIG that had locked up mid-clean. His face was red with a mix of effort and embarrassment. The weapon was half-stripped, but something had caught inside the slide. He muttered curses under his breath, glancing around to see who was watching. Reyes paused, set the voltmeter gently on the intake shelf, and watched him work. Then, calmly, "May I?" The room shifted, just a little. Heads turned. One of the techs near the back smirked, waiting for the punchline. Nobody handed their weapon to a civvy, uniform or not. Cross stood nearby, arms crossed, unreadable. He didn't say a word, but his eyes flicked between Reyes and the jammed sidearm. Then, after a beat, he gave the faintest nod. The E3 hesitated, but finally handed it over. Reyes accepted it like it was a scalpel, not casual, not reverent, just familiar. Her fingers moved with deliberate certainty. No wasted motion. No hesitation. In under 90 seconds, the pistol was completely field-stripped, cleared, cleaned, and reassembled. She cleared the chamber with a precise slide check, engaged the safety, and offered it back, grip first. The room was quiet. Not tense, not confused. Just aware. The kind of silence that only comes when something doesn't fit, and somehow fits too well. The E3 blinked, taking the pistol like it might still bite. He mumbled something that might have been thanks. Then from the back, a low voice. Calm. Certain. She's one of them. Nobody asked what that meant. They all just knew. Chief Warrant Officer Marin saw her before she saw him. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't narrow his eyes like he was suspicious. He just knew. That kind of knowing didn't come from paperwork or briefings. It came from memory unwelcome, heavy, and sharp around the edges. Reyes walked past him in the hallway outside the motor pool, her tool bag slung low against one hip, a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was just another Thursday. She didn't look his way. But Marin turned slowly, tracking her until she disappeared around the corner. He didn't say anything until later. The coffee machine in the back of the hangar brewed sludge that barely passed for caffeine, but it was quiet, and that mattered more. Cross was there, still trying to make sense of what she was, who she was. Marin poured himself a cup, let the silence stretch long enough to mean something, then finally said, "Kabul, 2013. Cross looked up. Marin didn't smile. We had a comms failure mid-sweep. Uplink node got cooked in a surge. We were boxed in 5 of us. Bad cover. No way to call for exfil. One guy was bleeding out through his ribs. He sipped the coffee, winced. Then she showed up. No patch, no call sign. Didn't even give us a name. Just walked into the crossfire like she'd misplaced something. Cross didn't interrupt. He knew better. She had a combat knife, and what looked like a field-made splicer kit. Patched that node under fire. No plate carrier. No helmet. Just bare hands and a pair of eyes that had seen too much. She never raised her voice, never rushed, just did the work. He let the cup hang mid-air for a second. When we got back to the FOB, command said we never made contact. Said the op stayed black. We called her Whisper. Cross frowned. Because she was quiet? Marin shook his head. No, because that's all that was left when she was gone. They didn't speak for a long time after that. Later, Cross spotted Reyes in the bay, alone, loading up a toolkit like it was any other day. Same gloves, same silence, same weight she carried without ever asking anyone else to hold it. And now he couldn't stop hearing the name. Whisper. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing ever does on a military base. Not change, not understanding, not respect. It comes slow, like rain seeping through concrete. Subtle enough to ignore until you look down and realize everything's already wet. At first it was just a pause, a few seconds longer than usual when she stepped into a room. Not tension, not caution, just silence, an unspoken acknowledgement. The kind you gave someone whose presence changed the air, whether they asked for it or not. Then it was the doors. A corporal held one open as she passed through the south maintenance bay. Said nothing. Didn't look at her. Just waited. Then moved on like it hadn't meant anything. Next came the coffee. Reyes found it one morning, sitting on the edge of her workbench in Bay 3. Black, no sugar. Still hot. No note. Just there. She didn't drink it. Just nodded once, barely, to no one in particular, and went back to repairing the fried circuit in the overhead drone uplink. The coffee was still there when she finished, but it was gone when she returned from stowing her tools. No one ever claimed it. No one ever needed to. The jokes stopped altogether, even the whispering kind that happened just out of earshot, replaced by quiet glances and the occasional shift in posture. Straight backs, squared shoulders, not formal, just present. The knife in her boot stopped being a curiosity. Nobody questioned why it was there anymore. It wasn't about regulation or protocol or what a contractor should or shouldn't carry. It was about what she carried, the weight behind it, the years, the unseen history written not in rank or ribbons, but in presence. You didn't need paperwork for that. And still, Reyes said nothing. She patched wires, replaced blown fuses, calibrated faulty optics. Systems ran cleaner after she touched them, more efficient, reliable in a way that made people sleep easier without knowing why. No one asked for her story. They just started standing a little straighter when she passed. Not because she demanded it, but because somewhere along the line, they realized they owed it. Major Price wasn't a bad man. He was just new enough to think that everything needed to follow the manual. Chain of command, dress regs, roles and responsibilities. The kind of officer who kept his boots polished and his protocols tighter. So when he saw Reyes walking across the range compound in fatigues, no rank, no patch, No issued ID did what he thought he was supposed to do. He called her in. She showed up on time, quiet as ever, toolkit still slung over one shoulder like she might go right back to work after the meeting. She stood at attention out of courtesy, not obligation. He didn't offer her a seat. "This is a uniform compliance discussion," he started, clicking his pen like it mattered. "You're listed as a civilian contractor. That means utilities and base badge, not combat fatigues." Reyes didn't blink. "I was told to blend in." He scoffed. The kind of sound men make when they think they're dealing with someone beneath their pay grade. "By who?" She said nothing. Price stared at her for a few seconds longer than he meant to. Something about her stillness, it wasn't stubbornness. It was certainty. Like she'd already had this conversation. Maybe not with him, but with people who outranked him. People who didn't leave paper trails. "Let's get this cleared up," he muttered, scribbling a note. "I'll escalate it." She nodded once and left. That night, after the admin office had gone dark, a courier arrived at Price's quarters with a locked aluminum case. No insignia, no return label, just a single tag. Level black. Vault clearance required. Price opened it alone. Inside was a photo. Grainy, black and white. Timestamp 2 years before Reyes had ever been listed on a contract. She was mid-stride through what looked like a collapsed FOB. Blood on her arm. Knife in one hand. Sat phone in the other. Her face was turned just enough to see the clarity in her eyes, focused, calm, the look of someone coordinating rescue under live fire. There was no caption, no mission name, just one line printed on the back. "Do not interfere." The next morning, the uniform inquiry disappeared, and Major Price started saluting her without ever calling it that. The team was due to deploy in 72 hours. One of the senior outfits, the kind that operated in places never printed on maps and answered to names that didn't exist. They moved like a unit that didn't waste time. Every motion practiced, deliberate. No idle chatter, just prep. But something was off. Corporal Arnett had spent the last 30 minutes wrestling with his optics, Rigan advanced thermal scope mounted to an MK-17 that wasn't holding zero past 100 meters. He'd tried everything short of a hammer, and the armorer hadn't been any help. Too many adjustments, not enough answers. Springs sticking, the armorer muttered eventually, defeated. Might be internal warping. Arnett wasn't convinced, but he was out of time. That's when some Nino-buddy would admit who suggested Reyes. She was across the compound, calibrating a power relay for the auxiliary comms array. Standard job, quiet location, no attention drawn, until the scope was placed on the bench beside her. She didn't look up, just finished what she was doing, wiped her hands, then finally turned her gaze to the scope. Barely glanced at it. One tilt of the head, one slow rotation. No manuals, no tools yet. "Windage tracks dragging," she said simply. "Internal springs off axis." The room went still for a beat. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. She opened her kit and pulled out a calibration tool no one else on base was authorized to have. Small, delicate, shaped like nothing in the standard armorer inventory. She worked quickly, efficiently, fingers moving with the kind of practiced grace that doesn't come from a classroom. Nobody asked where she got the tool. They just watched. When she was done, she handed the scope back without a word. Arnett mounted it again, looked through the lens, and adjusted his stance. The clarity was perfect, the alignment flawless. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded toward her boot. "You carrying that knife for show?" She looked at him without flinching. "Not anymore." He gave a half smile, then straightened. No jokes, no bravado, just a small motion, deliberate and clean a nod, then a salute. Not the kind from a ceremony, not for rank, but for recognition. And everyone watching understood. They didn't make an announcement. No policy memo. No base-wide directive to start treating Reyes differently. That's not how this place worked. Recognition came sideways here through body language, through who got asked to double-check a critical optic before a mission, or who got waved through a checkpoint without her badge scanned, through who people stopped interrupting. It happened slow, like water shaping stone. The new recruits stopped laughing. Not all at once, but in that gradual way people stop laughing when they begin to understand what they're looking at. Even the loudest ones, the ones who needed noise to feel seen, went quiet when she passed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't reverence. It was alignment. Like something inside them clicked into place. They didn't have to like her. They just had to know. And they did. Because now, when weapons malfunctioned, they didn't go to the armory first. They drifted casually, quietly toward Rhea's bench. No requests, no orders, just gear left in proximity. A jammed extractor, a scope that wouldn't hold zero, a trigger reset that felt just off. Problems left near her workspace, like offerings, not for inspection, for trust. She fixed what needed fixing, said nothing, didn't ask for thanks, didn't leave marks. The rifles just ran cleaner. The optics just aligned. The sidearms just worked. They still didn't know her story. They still asked around, still tried to piece it together in fragments and glances. Afghanistan, SOG, Kabul, whisper, maybe true, maybe all of it, maybe none. But none of that mattered anymore. Because the ones who did know quiet men with deep scars and distant eyeshad stopped treating her like a question and started treating her like a constant, like gravity, like a known variable in a world full of chaos. And every so often, when she crouched to lift a case or reach for a tool, the matte black blade in her boot would flash, just for a second, just enough to be seen. Nobody made a joke anymore. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. Sometimes it's the one who never had to draw their knife to be understood.